All right, testing, testing, testing. Let's see if this is working. Seems to be. Give everybody a chance to jump in here. Mm-mm-mm. 34-17. I think somebody picked that. All right, as folks are starting to join us, let me know if the sound's okay. I would greatly appreciate it. There it is. And everybody, just letting folks jump in. Can everybody hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Super quiet. Hey, Michael, is that any better now? No, it's too low? Okay. Give me 1 second. Can you hear me now? Is that any better? Any better? Any better? Any better? There we go. All right. Yes. Thanks, Donta. Thanks, John. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. So Georgia's 34-17 winners over Kentucky. Guess that blind squirrel found a nut. I found 2 of them. I'm sure I'm going to have some fun with snarky comments later in the week about that. Initial thoughts on this game were the fact that Georgia came in and did exactly what we kind of expected they would do. Georgia ran the ball insanely well. I mean, it's just think about it, 331 rushing yards. I know Benny Snell, and here's the thing: Benny Snell did not look Benny Snell-ish to me. I mean, he ran for 73 yards. That was not one of his best performances. He's run better against Georgia, but Georgia sold out to stop the run. They did give up a couple hundred yards passing, but that was by design. Remember when they went to Missouri, they sold out to stop the pass, so Missouri was able to run on. Everybody got worried about the run game. Yeah, there's a Channing Tindall sighting today, and yes, in answer to another question, I do expect to see him play a lot more. Channing and Kirby, in the press conference after the game, Kirby said we need to get Channing Tindall and Brenton Cox and guys like that on the field more. We got to play those young guys, and he was actually surprised by how well Jordan Davis did. They didn't travel Jordan Davis' first couple games, and then they said, look, we got to get that guy out there. Once they started doing it, amazing things happened. Some guys rise to the challenge, and this is a Georgia team that they said you need your best guys for the run, and they put in Otis Reese and guys like that. And yet, Johnny says Kentucky's what we knew they were. They were a running team. They were one-dimensional. That's what Kirby Smart wants to get rid of. Or that's what he wants to do in every game. He wants to make a team one-dimensional and force them to beat you that way. Against Missouri, he took away the pass. They had to run the ball. And we were all concerned about Georgia's run defense until Jim Donnan came on and said, hey, that was by design. And sure enough, in this game, yeah, here's a team that was throwing on Georgia, 220-something yards. But they only rushed it for, but he still got 73 yards. So you stopped him. And some big injuries early on. You lose DeAndre Walker. You lose Lamont Galliard. Miko Hardman goes down. Then Cade Mays goes down later in the game. For Georgia, with an offensive line that has just been by committee to come out and have such a big game, I'm just very impressed. Very impressed. I mean, we always do game balls, and I have to go. First game ball would have to be, of course, to Sam Pittman just for his recruiting, and putting those guys in there. I was just blown away by how well he did, how well that offensive line's held up. It's mind-boggling to think that at one point Georgia had 3 freshman offensive players on the offensive line and 2 sophomores. Now, granted, Isaiah Wilson is a redshirt freshman and Saul McKinley is a redshirt sophomore, but still, technically, 3 freshman offensive linemen, 2 sophomores, and I asked Kirby Smart, was he nervous about that? And he kind of shook his head. So it wasn't exactly the best he wanted. Do you think Cheney runs? Hang on. Do you think Cheney runs laps at practice this week for that goal line call again? Yeah. I mean, earlier in the game, you had 3rd and 1. What did you do? You brought in Justin Fields. He went and got it for you. They didn't huddle on the goal line like they should have. Like they should have last week. They should have this week. Huddle up. Don't let them know what you're doing. Bring in your jumbo package. Make sure you've got the backside pursuit covered, which I'd have to go back and watch the film. I'm not sure what they did, but how the hell do you get another goal line stance after getting stuffed 7 damn times and not be able to punch it in again? You go back to what Kirby said last week. You better score from further out. So, sorry we don't have the great Kentucky stadium in the back behind me. I'm in a square box. It's a bit creepy out here. I think I'm the last one left. Yeah. But at the same time, let's give credit to Jim Chaney. He called some pretty good plays. I mean, he did use Fields this week. He used him as we thought he could. And they did give him an opportunity to throw the ball. He didn't take it. He decided to tuck and run. It was not a good decision, or it didn't work out well for him. But let's see. Justin Fields, 6 carries, 27 yards, and I think 2 of them resulted in first downs. That's what he can do for you. You know, let him get out there. The guy had a great week of practice, you know. Zach Mulhern said it. I thought he called a good game outside the goal line stand. The jet sweep with Jason Stanley, I thought was a brilliant call. Some of the passes, the way he mixed up the passes and the runs, fantastic. That gut play that resulted in an 83-yard touchdown. Swift's 20-yard run, you give Swift the credit for that one. But again, good play call. There were some great draws in there, some great delays. Hey, a pass to the tight end for a touchdown. What about that? So anyway, as much as we're going to bang on Jim Chaney, I thought they played pretty well. Sorry, I got a bunch of other stuff going on here. Somebody's texting me. I thought that Georgia covered well. I thought they tackled well in space. I mean, they give the defense a lot of credit. The wide receivers and tight ends blocked their pants off. I was going to say something different there. Fantastic movement on the offensive line to open up holes, and then those 5-6 yard runs became 20, 30-yard runs because of your tight ends and your wide receivers. The wide receivers were all over the safeties, opening them up. And then, you know, when that safety is expecting to get hit and Mecole or Riley Ridley or Jeremiah Holloman peels off and goes out for a pass, they were open. So, Tate Crowder and Monty Rice started. I had predicted Tate Crowder to get the start last week. I don't think he did. I think it was Natrez Patrick. But yeah, Tate Crowder started. That's fantastic for him. Monty Rice played probably his best game. Let me look on here. I think he had 8 tackles. Yeah, hang on a second. Yeah, Monty Rice, 8 tackles, 5 solo, 1 sack for 13 yards. Jonathan Ledbetter with 6. So that's 2 game balls right there to Ledbetter and Monty Rice. They played lights out. So again, my fear going into this game for Georgia was Georgia not tackling well. We've seen them do that. We've seen them have a bad tackling game, and Benny Snell is a guy who just needs a little gap, and he flies through there, and he's incredibly destructive when he does it. Just give him a small space, and he's gone. So, but they tackled him well. He just didn't seem to have any big runs. I mean, there was just it seems like he gets up to the line and was kind of hesitant, but the gaps were full. Credit Jordan Davis, Tyler Clark, Jonathan Ledbetter, Julian Rochester. Those guys Kirby said last week we're going to build a wall, you know, from the inside out, and that wall was built. There was no place for him to go inside. Nothing up the middle like he'd seen before. Special teams were fantastic. You had 1 good punt. Georgia only punted the ball once, believe it or not. Granted, there were a couple fumbles that they'd like to get back, but 1 punt, I think it went 55 yards or something. 55 yards on a punt. Weird spiral on that Jake Camarda punt. I don't know what it looked like on television, but here it looked weird. But I actually bet a guy on Mecole Hardman's punt return because I couldn't see a corner of the end zone. I said, look, I guarantee you $10 he's going to return the ball into that corner of the end zone where I won't be able to get a photograph, and he almost did it. He almost did. So I looked like a genius by calling the punt before it happened, punt return. But a 65-yard punt return, that set the tone for the entire game. The defense comes out, gets a stop, special teams, big special teams play, punt gets returned almost for a touchdown. That changes the outcome of it. Going downhill, do I have the same intensity doing what I do as Holyfield in that photo? No. And that's Holyfield on the sideline. If you didn't see it, I had a picture of Justin Fields, Kirby Smart, and Elijah Holyfield reacting to DeAndre Swift's touchdown at the end of the first half. And Kirby's just like, oh my God. It reminds me of that popcorn eating gif that Kirby did. So it was really funny to see Holyfield. He's so geeked up for Elijah Holyfield, the guy who he fights for carries with. I mean, they're good friends. It's just like Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. They complement each other. They want to do well. They challenge each other. So he was just so excited for his guy. And of course, a lot of people have talked and complained about, not complained, but they keep saying that Justin Fields is unhappy. Justin Fields is going to transfer. Justin Fields is, he's not getting enough carries. There's all these different problems. Kirby pointed out in the post-game press conference that Justin had his best week of practice, or one of his best days of practice on Wednesday. He followed it up well on Thursday, or Tuesday, Wednesday. I can't go back and watch it. We have it posted at UGA Sports. He had a great week of practice. They knew they needed to get him in the game more because he earned it during practice, and he is a team guy. He's cheering, and Justin Fields was one of the first guys to congratulate DeAndre Swift when he came off the field, as was Elijah Holyfield. And Elijah is just, I told y'all before the season started, the guy's coming in with a chip on his shoulder. He wants to hurt people. He wants to run. He's a tough runner. He wants to show that Georgia recruited him, not just to sit in space, So he was the number 2 running back in the nation at the time, and he's done really well. And DeAndre Swift has that second gear. You can see him accelerate. It's unreal when he takes off. It's just mind-boggling. And then you just know that you're going to get punished when Elijah Holyfield runs it. Kirby Smart was asked, what is the difference in their styles? He said they were very similar. They're not. Elijah Holyfield is going to, by the end of the game, you don't want to tackle him anymore because you're just tired of getting run over by those legs. And Swift is just going to blow right past you. So I was very impressed with those guys. Quarterbacks, again, I said that I thought Georgia did a great job of using Justin Fields. I thought it was a good mix-up, but again, this is Jake Fromm's team. Fromm was 14 of 20, 113 yards, 1 TD. That's not going to make anybody really excited. 14 of 20 is a great completion percentage. 113 yards isn't that much, but that was the game plan. There was a couple underthrown balls, I thought, and one bad read there towards the end of the half. The first half, I think he pulled one a little short on Holyfield, but so he didn't have his best game, but he managed the game. He got Georgia in the right calls, and Georgia picked up 444 yards of offense. We have 444 yards of offense, and really, they weren't. His job was to get him in the right play call, hand the ball off. That's what Georgia came in to do this game, and as Georgia's running the ball, that's keeping Benny Snell on the sideline. So I'm very impressed. So offense was impressive. Defense was fantastic. Well, the thing of the offense scores 34 points. Kentucky hadn't given up 20 to anybody. So very impressive. Sorry, getting calls all over the place. Going over some of the stats here, I thought that Brian Harriet, saw him get a 20-yard kick return. I really want to see James Cook. I actually tweeted during the game, hey, let's see, I want to see Miko. I want to see them kick one short enough that you could get a return on it. And I said Miko when I meant to say Cook. I really thought this was the game that we would actually see Cook get a few more touches. Basically like that jet sweep that you saw with Stanley. He's a senior. I'm glad he got it. He practices it all the time. We've seen it called very seldom. But when they run that jet sweep, I thought it would be Akil Crumpton or James Cook, but apparently they decided to go with Jason Stanley. Again, a guy who's deserved it. He picked up 34 yards. It came in a perfect time. Very impressed with that. Georgia passing, they gave up. Terry Wilson for Kentucky was 23 of 29. again, by design, Georgia was going to let them have that. So, very impressed with that. Yeah, started late to the party. Pleasantly surprised with the physicality of the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I mean, that everyone said going into this game that it would be decided not by your, big players. It was going to be, your skill players. It was going to be decided by the line of scrimmage. If Georgia's offensive line could push in, that big Kentucky defense, and that's one of the biggest defenses I've ever seen in Kentucky, and it's a fantastic defense. And could Georgia account for Josh Allen on defense, and could they score more than 20 points? No one had done so all season. And Georgia's offensive line, you lost 2 starters. You lost your senior center, and you lost Cade Mays, and you replaced him with 2 other guys. And I don't say you didn't miss a beat, because you did have that high snap that there is a downside to having freshmen out there. We saw that against LSU with one of the blitzes, that I think Cade Mays was supposed to pick that up, or at least kind of slow the guy down. They see some stuff when they're freshmen that didn't happen. I'll get to that question in a second. And then we saw a high snap. But other than that, I thought, now there were moments of confusion when they got to the line and were calling out some of the protection, making the designations. I think that we saw a little bit of some guys being overruled, maybe. Again, it did not look like they were on the same page there a couple times, but it didn't matter because they still ran the ball down Kentucky's throat, and Kentucky, the second half couldn't do anything to stop it. When will we see Ben Cleveland? I think Ben should be back next week. I think this was like the last week that he was out. Lamont Galliard might be out for a couple weeks. Kirby says, they're still checking on it. He had a hyperextension of his knee. He went off on his own power. He kind of hobbled from the end zone all the way back to the sideline. I think he might be out a couple weeks. But here's the thing, and I go back to spring camp and Jim Donnan on our podcast. We were talking about all the other freshmen that were there, and he kept hammering this point home ad nauseum. He kept saying Trey Hill is a monster. Trey Hill makes his mouth water. He just kept talking about Trey Hill, and I'm like, yeah, but what about, all these other guys, and he kept hammering how good Trey Hill. And here's the thing, we were not doubting that, but we kept finding out that Trey Hill, through our sources, because when Donna said something about it, we looked into it. We found out that Trey Hill was working within the first team. And then Kirby Smart in the press conference today after the game said, I actually thought he could be a starter. We discussed it. Think about it, a freshman starter at center. What do you do with Lamont Galliard? He's a fantastic guard. You move him over. Georgia was having issues with his guards. You saw that musical chairs they had. You could have Lamont Galliard on one side, Ben Cleveland on the other. That's pretty damn good. So anyway, maybe you get Cade Mays should be fine. He had a stinger. He'll be back. Trey Hill is probably your center next week, which should be interesting if Lamont Galliard can't come back. And you have the possibility of getting Ben Cleveland back. So shout a game ball to everybody on the offensive line. Everybody gets one, because you had a guy like Kendall Baker. Let's see, Kendall has played left tackle, left guard, right tackle, and right guard, I believe. I believe he's played every position in this, except center. So, yeah, if Ben comes back, what happens to Cade Mays? He's been playing too well to just sit him. Yes, and that's one of the reasons Ben wants to come back. You don't want to, not to say you've been Wally Pitt, but remember last year Jacob Eason was healthy. He came back. Somebody had his job by the name of Jake Fromm. So, yeah, it's going to be fun to see all these freshmen play. I really don't know. I think, and it will be decided in practice, if you have a healthy Ben Cleveland, is he better than a healthy Ben Jones? Cade Mays. Ben Jones going way back. So Ben Cleveland versus Cade Mays is it's a great problem to have. So I don't know who starts there. Did I see Kirby Smart yelling at Jim Chaney? I've heard about it. I was on the sidelines. That's a great TV angle. It's not something that we see. So I did not see that. I will say this, though, a lot of times it's assumed that's who's being yelled at in the headsets. That's not always the case. But I think if you just got stuffed on, first and goals or second, third and goal, after the same thing happened last week, I would go out on a limb and say that's probably who you're yelling at. I mean, who else is on that? They do have a limited number of headsets down there, so I'm assuming that's who was being yelled at, and with good reason. Huddle up, change out players, bring in your bigger body, try something different. And again, they worked on it all week. Kirby's going to have it, so they probably worked on the plays that they put in practice, and they got nothing. Anyway, Georgia's now 12-0 in the last 2 years in the SEC East. They have gone undefeated in the East 2 years in a row. It's just now starting to hit me that now we start doing that thing where you go back and you start looking at when's the last time they lost an SEC East game. What are the final rushing numbers for Swift and Holyfield? DeAndre Swift had 16 carries for 157 yards. That is 9.8 yards per carry. Granted, one of them was an 83-yarder, but think about it. 9.8 yards a carry on 16 carries. Elijah Holyfield had 18 carries for 117 yards. Still, 6.4 yards a carry. 6.4. So you had two backs, one with 157 yards, one with 156 yards, one with 115 yards. Jason Stanley with 34, Justin Fields with 26. 9.8 and 6.44 yards a carry. That's just absolutely mind-boggling. Sorry, just reading through all the things. When LeCount puts on some weight, he's going to be a thumper. Yeah, he is. But remember, you also have Otis Reese, and we saw Otis Reese out there. We saw Channing Tindall out there. Brenton Cox was out there. Adam Anderson played well. I saw that freshman out there. This freshman class is, and again, I'm not trying to take anything away from the other classes. I know I sound like I'm fixated on the freshmen, but when you have 8 5-stars come in, and you know what Adam Anderson can do, you know what Richard LeCount can do, Otis Reese can do, you know what Quay Walker can do. You can't wait to see him on the field because you covered him in high school and you want to see what they do now. Big game against Auburn. I saw Auburn won. I'm going to be nervous about that game if I'm a Georgia fan, just because Auburn loves to ruin Georgia seasons. They are the #1 team for taking away bowl berths, SEC championships, which granted Georgia's already won the SEC East, but if you want to be in the playoffs, you got to take care of business when Auburn comes to town. I made the mistake on the podcast of saying that Auburn plays well in Georgia, at Georgia. They have not as of late. Now, back in the day, I do remember writing a story for ESPN about Georgia's success at Auburn, and Auburn's success at Georgia has been a long time ago. I'm an old man. I forget stuff like that. I forget that's not recent, but recently Auburn has not played well at Georgia, and you hope that trend continues. I mean, the defense to me is really coming together. I think you've seen 3 major injuries today that, or not injuries, but recoveries today. DeAndre Swift is back. Jake Roos made a good point saying in his halftime notes that DeAndre Swift is finally back. You saw that today, that breakaway speed. That's what we were looking for. He was back last week too, but DeAndre Swift is finally fully healthy, and it's showing. And I think Monty Rice getting healthy is fixing a lot of the ills on the defense. Your middle linebacker should be your leading tackler. Monty Rice was there, 8 tackles, 5 of them solo. He was a nightmare. That is what, he's not Roquan Smith, but there aren't any like him, but he is giving Roquan Smith like production, at least one guy there is. So I thought Tate Crowder had a good game. Natrez Patrick got tackled on one play where he should have been able to make a sack in the back, or a tackle in the backfield. The officiating, moment of silence for the officiating, because it's dead, it's terrible. And it's not just from the Georgia standpoint. The Wildcats had, Kentucky, they had a lot of calls that they were very angry about, as they should have been. There were some garbage, horrible calls. I don't know what to say about it. I mean, I'm not a great orator, but I go speechless when I try to figure out what the purpose of the SEC refs is. I mean, there was some bad calls there, but again, I thought the secondary played well. I thought your safeties, LeCount is, that was a question when LeCount puts on some weight. He's playing really well. DeAndre Baker had a pass interference call. People are going to test him, and there were, in other words, there were some penalties that Georgia needs to clean up before they play Auburn. And after last week, I was very worried about Georgia playing Georgia Tech. I was worried about the middle, that A gap. But seeing Monty Rice play well and seeing Jordan Davis play well and Julian Rochester, I'm feeling better about the Georgia Tech game. But again, against Auburn, Auburn's season could be made if they could beat Georgia. So keep that in mind. Although I think Georgia wins that game, I'm not too worried about it. But again, it's just not something I'm comfortable with. I mean, if you're a Georgia fan, you can never be comfortable at a Georgia-Auburn game when something important's on the line, because Auburn always takes it away from you. Not always, but, well, hell, last year, what happened? You had to beat them again in the SEC championship. You were number 2 team in the nation, you're cruising, things look great. You go into Auburn and get your head kicked in. That's typically how it goes with Auburn. I remember, this was pointed out to me years and years ago by Jeff Danzel. We did a book together, and Jeff pointed out, I mean, he had a list of all the SEC titles and things that and granted they're at the end of the season, but that loss to Auburn at the end, and vice versa. Georgia has played spoiler for Auburn so many years. That's why it's such a wonderful, wonderful rivalry. It's so old and vicious and mean-spirited and evil, and it just makes my heart happy. Nothing like a great game like that. Yeah, just make the open field tackles. Yeah, if you can get them, sure. So, Bama's already up 16-0. I'm not surprised. All right, folks. Like I said, game balls. I would like to give one to Justin Fields, because I thought he came in, got put in a hard work week of practice. Is a team player. Was one of the first guys, congratulating other guys coming off the field. He got in that little go in for one play. He made the most of his plays. I thought that was very impressive. You have to give one to Elijah Holyfield. You have to give one to DeAndre Swift. You have to give one to everybody on the offensive line for the work they did. Give one to Riley Ridley for a pretty good block downfield. One to Sam Pittman for recruiting that offensive line and having those guys ready. Of course, give 2 to Kendall Baker for coming in and playing yet another position on the offensive line. Hey, thanks, Michael. Tyson Campbell, I wouldn't give him a game ball, but yes, he did play better. But again, everyone's going to pick on him because you don't want to throw against DeAndre Baker. Definitely Monty Rice and Jonathan Ledbetter on the defense. And Tyler Clark, I thought, had a good game too. So those are the game balls. Apparently we have an unlimited amount of them. Tune in Tuesday. We're going to talk a lot more about the Georgia-Kentucky game and look ahead to Auburn. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'll talk to y'all later.